The night it happened, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. I remember the exact time, 2:14 a.m., because the digital clock's red numbers burned into my eyes when I rolled over to look. At 70 years old, I don't sleep deeply anymore, but that night the vibration felt different, urgent, relentless. I fumbled for my glasses and picked up the phone, squinting at an unknown number. For a second, I almost ignored it, but something inside me, an instinct I couldn't name, made me swipe to answer. "Grandma," a small voice whispered, trembling so much I could barely make out the words. "Mommy won't wake up, and Daddy's really mad." I froze my breath, catching in my chest. "Lily, sweetheart, where are you?" There was a pause, a soft sniffle, and then a sound I'll never forget. The click of a door slamming somewhere far away, followed by muffled shouting. Then silence. The line went dead. For a moment, I just sat there in the dark, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. My first thought was that I must be dreaming. My second was that my 7-year-old granddaughter had just called me from hell. I called back immediately. No answer. I tried again and again. Nothing. I switched to my daughter Emma's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Her chirpy, recorded voice. "Hi, this is Emma. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." Sounded cruel now, like a lie whispered through static. I threw on my coat, grabbed my car keys, and was out the door before I'd even thought it through. The night air was cold, biting through the thin fabric of my robe, but I didn't care. I drove through the sleeping streets of our small town, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The rain had started a fine mist that blurred the headlights into ribbons of silver. I whispered prayers I hadn't said in decades, the same ones I used to mumble when Emma was little and running a fever. Please, God, let them be okay. Please don't take her from me, too. It took me 23 minutes to get to her house on Birchwood Lane. By the time I pulled up, I already saw the flashing lights, blue and red reflections pulsing across the wet pavement. 2 police cruisers, an ambulance. My heart dropped into my stomach. I ran toward the porch before the car had even stopped rolling. "Ma'am, you can't go in there," one of the officers said, stepping in front of the door. His voice was steady, rehearsed, but his eyes told a different story. "I'm her mother," I gasped. "My daughter, Emma Morrison, please." He hesitated, then motioned to another officer. They exchanged a look, the kind people share when they're about to tell you something that will break you. "Mrs. Bennett," the first one said. Carefully reading my name off his notepad, "Your daughter was found unresponsive. I'm very sorry." The world went quiet. The rain, the sirens, even my heartbeat. Everything stopped for one long, impossible second. I shook my head like I could undo his words. "No," I whispered. "No, she's not. She can't be." "She's gone, ma'am," he said softly. "It appears to be suicide." Suicide. The word slammed into me like a physical blow. I stumbled back my legs, giving way, my hand clutching at the porch railing to keep from collapsing. Behind the officer paramedics were wheeling out a covered stretcher. A flash of blonde hair slipped out from under the sheet before one of them tucked it back in. My daughter. My only child. I didn't even realize I was screaming until the officer grabbed my shoulders to steady me. I could taste salt tears or rain I didn't know. Somewhere in the chaos, I remembered Lily. "Where's my granddaughter?" I demanded. "Where's Lily?" The officer turned to look over his shoulder, then called to someone inside. A female officer emerged a moment later holding a small shivering figure wrapped in a blanket. Lily's eyes were red and wide, her lips trembling. When she saw me, she broke free from the woman's grasp and ran straight into my arms. "Grandma," she sobbed, burying her face in my coat. "Mommy fell asleep and wouldn't wake up. Daddy got mad and threw things. He told me not to tell anyone." I held her so tight I was afraid I might crush her, but I couldn't let go. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now. I've got you." Behind us, the house was a scene from a nightmare. Shattered glass on the floor, a table overturned, a half-empty bottle of wine next to a glass stained red. I caught a glimpse of Emma's purse on the counter, her phone still plugged into the charger, the screen glowing with a missed call. My name. By the next morning, the police had ruled it a probable suicide pending toxicology results. There was no sign of forced entry, the detective told me. No struggle, nothing out of place except for the broken glass. Her husband said she'd been depressed. Her husband, Evan. The moment I saw him that morning, standing in the doorway of the hospital waiting room, I felt the temperature in the air drop 10 degrees. He was too calm. His shirt neatly pressed, his voice steady, not a single tear. "She'd been drinking a lot lately," he said when the officer asked questions. "I tried to get her help. She couldn't handle the pressure." Pressure Emma had been full of life. She'd just gotten a promotion at work, had been planning a trip with Lily for the summer. Nothing about her had screamed despair, but when I looked at Evan, I saw something behind his eyes, a coldness that made my stomach turn. After the funeral, I went to Emma's house one last time to gather her things. Evan had taken Lily to stay with his sister for a while, he said, until he could sort things out. He didn't invite me in. He didn't even look me in the eye. But when he left, I went anyway. I had to. The house smelled faintly of her perfume and something else. Something sour and metallic like dried blood. I moved through the room, slowly touching everything she'd left behind, a hairbrush with blonde strands, a sweater folded on the couch, her favorite mug still in the sink. And then, in the bedroom closet, I found it. A small envelope taped inside the lining of one of her coats. My name written in her handwriting. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single note written in blue ink. The words were simple, but they stole the breath from my lungs. "If anything happens to me, take care of Lily." The paper slipped from my hand and fluttered to the floor. "If anything happens to me." That wasn't something a woman planning to kill herself would write. That was a warning. I stood there, the note shaking in my hand, the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Then I heard a noise behind me, the faint creak of the front door opening. Evan's voice drifted through the hall, calm and low. "It's better if you don't dig, Helen," he said, "for everyone's sake. Do you think a mother could ever take her own life and leave her child behind? Or do you believe, like I do, that some deaths are staged to hide something darker?" Comment 1. If you believe Emma was murdered, like this video, if you think the truth always finds a way out. The next morning, I brought Lily home with me. Evan didn't protest. In fact, he looked almost relieved when I asked. "It's probably best," he said, voice flat. "She's been having nightmares. I could use a few days to process." He didn't even kiss his daughter goodbye. He just nodded at her like she was a neighbor's child, not his own flesh and blood. That moment told me everything I needed to know about what kind of man he was. My house was small and quiet, filled with memories of the life I had before everything fell apart. I'd lived there alone since my husband died 8 years ago. I thought I'd learned to make peace with solitude, but that morning, the silence felt heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lily stood in the doorway of the guest room, clutching a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She looked too small for the space. "You can sleep here, sweetheart," I told her gently. "It's yours for as long as you want." She nodded without a word and placed the rabbit on the pillow. I noticed she kept glancing at the window like she expected someone to appear outside. When I asked if she wanted breakfast, she whispered, "Only if Daddy doesn't come." The words made my stomach twist. I knelt in front of her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You're safe here," I said. "Daddy can't come in unless Grandma says so, okay?" She nodded again, but her eyes stayed wide-haunted. Later, while I cooked eggs, I caught her quietly locking the kitchen door behind me. For the first few days, she barely spoke. She'd sit at the table drawing pictures while I folded laundry or watered the garden. Her drawings were dark for a 7-year-old, black crayon lines. Heavy red circles, stick figures with no faces. When I asked about them, she said, "It's just dreams." One afternoon, I walked past her room and saw her coloring on the floor. She didn't hear me at first, so I just watched. She drew a tall man standing over a woman who was lying down. Above them, a small girl was hiding behind a door, crying. The man's hands were red. "Lily," I said softly, and she jumped, nearly tearing the paper. "What's that picture about?" She looked down, biting her lip. "It's not real," she said quickly. "It's just pretend." But it wasn't pretend. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the way children sound when they're trying to protect someone who hurt them. My heart broke a little more in that moment. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I went into her room to turn off the lamp. She was curled up tight under the blanket, the stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest. When I leaned closer to kiss her forehead, I saw them faint bruises, small and circular on her wrist. I turned her hand gently, careful not to wake her. The marks were fresh. I felt something shift inside me, a cold rage that burned slow and steady like coals under ash. I wanted to believe she'd just fallen, but deep down I already knew better. I'd seen bruises like that before years ago on my own daughter's arms when she was pregnant with Lily. Back then, Emma had said she'd tripped or that the dog had pulled too hard on the leash. She'd smiled when she said it, but her eyes had always been afraid. I hadn't wanted to interfere. I'd told myself it wasn't my place, that she needed space to handle her own marriage. That was my mistake, the kind that doesn't just haunt you, it defines you. The next morning, I asked Lily where she got the bruises. She looked at her wrist, then at me, and for a moment I thought she might tell the truth. Instead, she whispered, "Daddy says accidents happen when you talk too much." The words hit me like a knife. He said that I asked. She nodded, her lips trembling. It was my fault, she added quickly. I made him mad. I spilled juice on his papers. I knelt beside her, holding her face in my hands. "Sweetheart, nothing that happens is your fault. Not one thing. Do you understand me?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. She just leaned into my shoulder and whispered, "Please don't tell him I told." I promised I wouldn't, but inside I was already breaking that promise. That evening, I went through Emma's note again, this time looking for anything I might have missed. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume, that soft floral scent she'd always worn. My eyes traced the same 7 words over and over. "If anything happens to me, take care of Lily," until the letters blurred into shapes. It wasn't just a plea, it was a confession. My daughter had known she was in danger. I thought about going to the police, but what would I tell them? That a 7-year-old's drawing looked suspicious, that her bruises might mean abuse, that my gut told me her father was lying. I'd already seen how easily they accepted the word suicide. Without evidence, they'd call me paranoid or worse, senile. So instead, I started documenting everything. Every bruise, every strange comment, every time Lily woke up screaming in the middle of the night. I wrote down dates, times, details, even the color of the crayon she used when she drew the man with red hands. It made me feel like I was doing something, even if it was just clinging to sanity. But the unease in my chest only grew. Sometimes at night, when the wind rattled the windows, I'd swear I heard footsteps outside. Once I found a cigarette butt on the porch, Evan's brand. He smoked those cheap menthols Emma had always hated. I started double-locking the doors. I put a chair against the back door before going to bed. Lily began sleeping in my room after she had a nightmare where Daddy was in the window. I told her it was just a dream, but I couldn't shake the image once she described it, a shadow with eyes that glowed like metal. 2 days later, I went into the living room and found Lily sitting on the couch staring at the TV. It wasn't on. When I asked what she was doing, she said listening for Mommy. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" She pointed to the TV screen. "Sometimes I hear her voice. She says it's not my fault." My hands went cold. Children imagine things, I told myself. They grieve differently, but the way she said it, the certainty made me wonder if Emma was still trying to speak somehow through her daughter. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and Emma's note in front of me. I kept thinking about Lily's drawings, the bruises, the fear that lived in her eyes. None of it fit the story of a happy family torn apart by a mother's depression. Maybe I was chasing ghosts. Maybe grief had made me delusional, but one truth settled heavy in my bones. Emma had reached out from the grave to warn me, and if I didn't listen, I would lose Lily too. By the time dawn broke, I knew what I had to do. I was going back to that house. Whatever Emma wanted me to find, I'd find it. And if Evan was hiding something, I'd tear the walls down myself to uncover it. Because this time I wouldn't stay silent, not again. The morning I decided to return to Emma's house, the air felt thick like the sky itself was holding its breath. I waited until Lily had gone down for her nap before I left. I told her I was going to the store. She looked up at me with sleepy eyes and said, "Don't let Daddy see you." I promised I wouldn't. It was only a 20-minute drive, but every mile felt like a test of courage. When I turned onto Birchwood Lane, the sight of the house hit me like a fist. The police tape was gone now, but the blinds were drawn tight and the porch light, still broken from that night, hung at an angle, swaying in the breeze. Evan's truck wasn't in the driveway. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, my heartbeat so loud it drowned out the sound of my footsteps. The spare key Emma had given me years ago was still in my wallet, a small, flat reminder of the trust she once had in me. I used it, praying no one would see me slip inside. The smell hit me first, the faint odor of old wine cleaning products, and something underneath it sour and stale, like grief that hadn't been scrubbed away. The silence was absolute. Even the air felt afraid to move. I started in the living room where the overturned table had been righted and the shards of glass were gone. Everything looked normal, too normal. Evan had staged it. Erased the chaos as if the tragedy that happened here was just an unfortunate accident to be forgotten. The framed family photos were still on the mantel, Emma smiling too hard, Evan with his arm around her shoulders, Lily in front of them, forced into a grin that didn't reach her eyes. I walked slowly, scanning the room like a detective in someone else's life. My hands trembled when I touched Emma's mug on the counter, still faintly stained with lipstick. The dishwasher was full of clean plates, stacked neatly, sterile. It felt like walking through a museum of the dead, everything preserved, but the life gone. Upstairs, the hallway was darker. The light bulb above flickered once and went out, leaving only the weak light from the bedroom window. I went into Emma and Evan's room. The bed was made, but the sheets smelled faintly of bleach. On the nightstand was a photo of Emma and Lily at the park, their faces bright under the sunlight. I reached out and traced my daughter's smile with my fingertip, and for a moment I forgot to breathe. Then I noticed something small and out of place on the floor near the dresser, a tiny pink hair clip one Lily used to wear. I bent down to pick it up, and when I straightened my eyes, caught a faint reflection under the bed. Something metallic. I crouched and reached under my hand, brushing against fabric and then a hard plastic surface. I pulled it out, a small stuffed rabbit. Lily's other one, identical to the one she kept at my house. I frowned. "How did this get here?" I whispered. The toy's fur was matted, one button eye loose. When I turned it over, I saw it an unnatural slit along the seam of its back, stitched shut with dark thread. My heart started to pound. I grabbed a small sewing kit from Emma's dresser and carefully cut the stitches open. Inside, tucked deep into the cotton stuffing, was a small black object, a camera. One of those nanny cams no bigger than a thumb. The lens was cracked, but the memory card slot was intact. My pulse quickened. Emma had hidden it. I found a card reader in the desk drawer Emma used to edit photos for work and plugged the tiny SD card into her old laptop. The screen flickered to life. For a second, I thought the files might be corrupted. Then the first thumbnail loaded a still image of the living room. I clicked it, and the video began to play. The footage was grainy, but I could make out the shapes. Emma on the couch, her posture tense, her face pale. She kept glancing toward the front door like she was waiting for someone. The timestamp said 11:42 p.m., the night she died. I turned the volume up. Her voice came through low and shaking. "If you're watching this," she said, looking straight into the camera, "it means he did it." My breath caught in my throat. Evan's been following me. He's been drinking more, getting angry. He said if I ever tried to leave him, no one would believe me. He said he'd make it look like I couldn't handle motherhood. She swallowed hard tears running down her cheeks. "Please, Mom, if anything happens to me, take care of Lily. Don't let him near her." I froze, staring at the screen. My daughter's voice, her fear, it was all right there, proof. A sound from downstairs snapped me back. The unmistakable creak of the front door opening. My blood turned to ice. I slammed the laptop shut and clutched the rabbit to my chest, listening. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. He was home. I moved quickly, sliding the laptop under the bed and pressing myself against the wall beside the closet. The footsteps came closer, up the stairs, pausing at the top. Then his voice low, almost conversational. "You shouldn't be here, Helen." My throat went dry. I didn't answer. He walked into the room, his shadow stretching across the floor. I could see his reflection in the mirror, broad shoulders, calm expression, no surprise in his eyes. He'd expected me. "I knew you'd come back," he said, scanning the room. "You always were the type who couldn't leave things alone." He took a few steps closer, his shoes creaking on the floorboards. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't see the laptop. "Emma didn't kill herself," I said finally, my voice shaking but loud enough to fill the silence. I saw her video. He stopped moving. His face changed just slightly, the polite mask cracking. What video? You know exactly what I mean. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was trying to break through my ribs. You hurt her. You made her write that note. He laughed softly, and the sound chilled me. You think you can prove that you're an old woman grasping at ghosts. The police closed the case. I'll reopen it. He tilted his head, studying me like a scientist examining a specimen. You really think anyone will believe you? They already think you're fragile. One phone call from me and they'll say you're harassing me. They'll take Lily away from you. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the rabbit, but I tightened my grip. I'll never let you near her again. He smiled, then slow, cruel. We'll see. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The rain had started outside again, tapping against the window like nervous fingers. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. The front door slammed a minute later. I stayed frozen where I was until I heard his truck pull away. Only then did I kneel and retrieve the laptop. The video was still open. I copied it to a flash drive and slipped it into my coat pocket. My hands were slick with sweat. As I left the house, the clouds broke open, releasing a hard, cold rain. I stood in the driveway, drenched, shaking but alive. Emma's voice still echoed in my head. Don't let him near her. When I got home, Lily was awake, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing again. This time the picture showed 3 people. A little girl, a woman with gray hair, and another woman standing behind them, smiling. Who's that? I asked, pointing to the last one. She looked up and smiled faintly. Mommy, she said thank you. I couldn't speak. I just hugged her, holding her close while the storm raged outside. That night, when I watched the video again, I noticed something new. A faint reflection in the window behind Emma. A shadow. A man standing there watching. The timestamp was 11:58 p.m., minutes before she died. Now I had proof. Proof of her fear, her voice, and his presence. But proof wasn't safety. It was a loaded gun I wasn't sure I could fire. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Tom Riley, a retired detective who'd been a friend of my husband's. When he picked up, I said, Tom, it's Helen. I think my daughter was murdered, and I have the evidence to prove it. He didn't ask questions, didn't doubt me. His voice was calm. Then don't move, Helen. I'll come by tomorrow. And whatever you do, don't let him know what you found. Tom came the next morning wearing an old gray jacket and that same cautious look he'd always had back when he worked homicide. We sat at my kitchen table, the flash drive between us like it was something alive. He watched the footage in silence, his jaw tightening with each passing second. When Emma's face appeared on the screen, confessing her fear, his hands clenched into fists. By the time the reflection of Evan flickered in the window, he stopped the playback and exhaled slowly. This isn't nothing, he said, but it's not enough for an arrest. The timestamp puts him there, but it doesn't show the act. Without proof of violence, the DA won't touch it. I leaned forward. Then what do we do? You stay quiet, he said. You document everything. Don't confront him again. Let me start digging employment records, financials, anything suspicious. If there's money or insurance involved, we'll find it. His words made sense, but patience wasn't something grief leaves behind. Every hour Lily was out of my sight felt dangerous. Still, I promised I'd wait. For a week, nothing happened. Evan didn't call, didn't show up, didn't ask about his daughter. I almost believed he'd left us alone. Then, on a Friday morning, I opened the front door to find a woman standing there with a clipboard and a badge clipped to her jacket. Mrs. Bennett, I'm from Child Protective Services. We've received a report regarding your granddaughter, Lily. The world tilted for a second. A report. She nodded. We've had allegations of neglect and emotional manipulation. The claim states you've been coaching the child to lie about her father, creating false memories. I nearly laughed, but my voice came out shaking. Who said that? I'm not at liberty to disclose that information, she replied. May I come in? I let her in because I had nothing to hide, but the feeling of invasion was immediate. She walked through every room, writing notes, asking questions in that calm, professional tone people use when they've already decided you're guilty. Lily clung to me silent. When the woman asked her if she liked living here, she nodded. When she asked if Grandma ever said bad things about Daddy, she froze. I could feel her trembling. It's okay, honey, I said softly, but Lily didn't answer. She just looked at me, wide-eyed, and whispered, "He said if I talk bad, things happen again." The woman's pen stopped mid-scribble. "Who said that, Lily?" But my granddaughter only pressed her face into my side. The caseworker sighed, closed her notebook, and said she'd follow up soon. As soon as she left, I collapsed into a chair. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Evan had done it. He'd gone to the system before I could. He'd flipped the narrative. Now I wasn't just a grieving mother, I was an unstable old woman making up stories. That evening, I called Tom. "He's trying to take her from me," I said. "He called child services." "Of course he did," Tom replied. "He's protecting himself." "You rattled him. That's good. It means he's scared." "Scared people destroy everything around them," I said quietly. Tom paused before answering. "I'll pull his financials tonight. Don't lose your head. That's exactly what he wants." But it was hard not to. The next few days blurred together a series of knocks at the door, phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize, neighbors suddenly too busy to talk. Even the woman across the street who used to bring me soup when I was sick turned away when she saw me outside. Evan had poisoned the air around me. I found out later he'd told people I was losing my mind, that I'd been hallucinating, seeing Emma's ghost dragging Lily into sick games. Someone even reported hearing me talking to the walls. Maybe they weren't wrong. I did talk to Emma sometimes when I was alone. I'd whisper, "I'm trying, baby. I'm trying to fix it." The final blow came the following Tuesday. Another caseworker arrived this time with a police officer. They said they needed to verify the child's safety. The officer's hand never left his belt as they searched the house. They asked if I had any medications, any history of mental illness. I wanted to scream at them that the real danger was the man they weren't looking at. Instead, I sat quietly while they flipped through my life like it was evidence. When they left, Lily ran to me and started crying. "I don't want to go with Daddy," she said. "Please don't let them make me." "I won't," I whispered. "No one's taking you anywhere," but I wasn't sure that was true. That night, Tom called again. "I found something," he said. "Evan took out a $500,000 life insurance policy on Emma 6 months before she died. He's been collecting payments since. It's registered to his personal account." "Can we use that?" I asked. "Eventually. But right now, you need to be careful. If he thinks you're building a case, he might get desperate." I almost laughed at that. Desperate? He's already a murderer. Still, Tom's warning echoed in my mind long after we hung up. I started sleeping with the lights on, locking the windows even during the day. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Once, when I went to take the trash out, I saw tire tracks in the mud behind the house. The next night, I found cigarette butts on the porch again. The stress began to seep into everything. I burned dinner twice, forgot where I left my keys, caught myself staring out the window for hours. Lily noticed. "Grandma, are you scared?" she asked one morning. No, I lied. I'm just tired. But she didn't believe me. Children never do. A few days later, the caseworker returned. "Mrs. Bennett," she said carefully, "we've received new complaints. The father claims you're preventing contact and causing emotional harm. We may have to consider temporary placement until the investigation concludes." My world stopped. "Temporary placement?" She nodded. "It's standard procedure." Standard procedure to hand a child to the man who murdered her mother. I shouted before I could stop myself. Her eyes went wide. "Mrs. Bennett, please lower your voice." I did the opposite. "You think I'm crazy, fine. But when that little girl ends up dead too, you'll remember I tried to warn you." She left quickly, muttering about escalating behavior. I watched her drive away through the front window, my hands pressed to the glass, my breath fogging the pain. For the first time since Emma died, I felt completely alone. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the note again. "If anything happens to me, take care of Lily." The paper was soft from being handled so much the edges frayed. I poured myself a cup of tea and forgot to drink it. My thoughts kept circling the same truth I had failed Emma once by staying silent. I would not fail her child. Around midnight, I heard a sound outside, a crunch of gravel, slow, deliberate. I turned off the lamp and peered through the curtains. Headlights glowed faintly at the end of the driveway. My heart started hammering. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then the engine revved and drove away. When I turned back, Lily was standing in the hallway, clutching her rabbit. "He's here again, isn't he?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "Not anymore, sweetheart. Go back to bed." She shook her head. "He said you can't hide me forever." I froze. When did he say that? Last night in my dream. He was standing outside the window. My knees gave out. I sat on the floor and pulled her close, rocking her back and forth. It was just a dream, I whispered, though I wasn't sure I believed it. When she finally fell asleep, I went into the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back didn't look like me anymore. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn, her hair wild. For a terrifying second, I wondered if everyone else was right, if grief had truly driven me insane. But then I remembered Emma's face in that video, her trembling voice, her plea. I wasn't crazy. I was the only sane person left in this nightmare. The next morning, I made a decision. If the system wouldn't protect Lily, I would. Even if it meant breaking the law. Even if it meant losing everything. Before dawn, I packed a small bag for Lily, closed the rabbit, her favorite book. I stuffed the flash drive and Emma's note into my coat pocket. Then I sat at the table, waiting for the sun to rise, waiting for Tom to call, waiting for a sign that what I was about to do wasn't madness. When the phone finally rang, I grabbed it so fast I nearly dropped it. Tom's voice was low, urgent. "Helen, listen to me. He knows you have the video. I heard from a friend in the department Evan's been asking about you. You need to get out for a while." "I can't leave," I said, "not without Lily." "Then take her," he said. "Go somewhere safe. I'll handle the rest." The line went quiet. For a long time, I just sat there clutching the phone. The sun was rising outside, pale light spilling across the floor. I looked at Lily sleeping on the couch, her small chest rising and falling, and I made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait for another tragedy. This time, I would be the one to strike first. By the time Tom came over that night, I was standing in the kitchen with my suitcase half packed and Lily's coat folded on the table. I didn't even hear him knock. I only realized he was there when his voice broke the silence. "Helen," he said quietly, "don't run. That's what he wants you to do." I turned toward him. He called child services. He's watching the house, and I found cigarette butts outside again. "You think he'll just stop? He's tightening the noose, Tom." He looked tired, older than I remembered. "I know, but if you disappear, he wins. You'll look unstable, and they'll hand Lily to him without a fight." The words hit me hard. He was right, but I couldn't shake the image of Emma lying cold in that house. Then what am I supposed to do? Wait until he finishes what he started? Tom put a folder on the table. "No, you let me build the case. I've been digging deeper, and I found something that might turn everything." I opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of bank statements, life insurance documents, and an old police report. "What is this?" He pointed to the insurance papers. $500,000. Emma's death was ruled suicide, so the payout went straight to Evan. But here's the thing. He'd been defaulting on his mortgage and maxing out his credit card 6 months before she died. 2 weeks after her funeral, every debt was cleared. I felt sick. He killed her for money. "That's part of it," Tom said. He tapped the police report. "This is from 8 years ago. Domestic assault in another state. Same man, same pattern. The victim dropped the charges after he promised to get help." Guess who the witness was? My throat tightened. His ex-wife. Tom nodded. "He's been doing this a long time." The air in the room seemed to shift. For weeks, I'd been drowning in fear and confusion, but now there was something sharper beneath it, clarity. "So what happens now?" "I'm taking this to a friend in the prosecutor's office," Tom said. "If we can tie the life insurance to the abuse, they'll reopen the case. But Helen?" He hesitated. "You need to be careful. He's desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. Don't let him see you crack." I nodded, but the truth was I already had. That night after Tom left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the wall until the room blurred. The clock ticked loudly, mocking me. Every sound became a threat, the creak of the house settling the hum of the refrigerator, even the wind against the window pane. When Lily woke up crying from another nightmare, I nearly screamed from the sound. I held her until she fell asleep again, her small body trembling against mine. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. "It's almost over. Grandma's going to fix everything." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. The next morning, I found an envelope wedged in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Stop digging, or you'll lose her too." My knees gave out. I sank onto the porch steps, the letter fluttering in my hands. There were smudges of dirt on it, like it had been dropped in the yard before being stuffed into the box. I knew who sent it. When I showed Tom, he said it was enough for a restraining order, but we both knew how worthless that would be against a man like Evan. The police would take days, maybe weeks to process it. Meanwhile, he'd be free to circle us like a wolf. The pressure kept building. Social services called again, demanding another inspection. The neighbors avoided eye contact. The mailman stopped delivering to the door, leaving letters at the curb. I could feel the world turning against me, and for the first time I understood what Emma must have felt before she died, cornered, unheard, trapped inside her own nightmare. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, I sat alone in the dark, a glass of wine untouched beside me. My reflection in the window looked like a ghost. I whispered to it, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm losing my mind." Then the phone rang. The sound jolted through me like a gunshot. It was Tom. "Helen, listen. They're reopening the case. The DA wants a statement from you." I almost dropped the phone. "What?" "I sent the insurance documents and the old assault report. They're bringing in Evan for questioning tomorrow morning. It's not a charge yet, but it's a start." Relief flooded me so fast it made me dizzy. Finally, I breathed. Finally, someone's listening. But the relief didn't last. That same night as I was locking up, I heard a noise from outside, the scrape of tires on gravel. I froze, peering through the curtains. A car sat at the end of the driveway, headlights off. My pulse thundered in my ears. I grabbed the flashlight and crept to the door. The porch light flickered when I turned it on, nothing. The car was gone. But when I looked down, there was something on the steps, a child's drawing. I bent to pick it up. It was Lily's, torn from one of her sketchbooks. Only this time, the image was different. It showed our house drawn in black crayon, with fire coming out of the windows. 3 figures stood outside, a man, a woman, and a little girl. The man's hands were red again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the lights on the letter and the drawing on the coffee table and the video of Emma open on my laptop screen. Every few minutes, I'd rewind it just to hear her voice again. "Please, Mom, if anything happens to me, take care of Lily." By dawn, something inside me broke and rebuilt itself at the same time. I realized I couldn't keep reacting. I had to act. If the law failed again, I'd find another way. When Lily came downstairs rubbing her eyes, I asked her if she wanted pancakes. She nodded sleepily. For a few minutes, it felt normal. The smell of butter and syrup filled the kitchen. Then she said something that froze me mid-stir. "Grandma Daddy said we're going home soon." I set the spatula down. "When did he say that?" "Last night. I heard him through the window. He said, 'You can't keep me forever.'" I went cold. "Did you see him?" She shook her head. "I just heard him." That was the moment I knew we couldn't wait for justice to crawl through paperwork. I called Tom again. "He's threatening us," I said. "I'm done waiting." He hesitated. "Helen." "No. You told me desperate men make mistakes." "Well, so do desperate mothers." He sighed. "Then promise me one thing, record everything. If you confront him, make sure someone knows." I promised. I think he knew I didn't mean it. That afternoon, the social worker returned unexpectedly, this time with a second officer. She claimed it was a routine welfare check. But when I opened the door, I saw the way the officer looked at me like I was the problem. "Mrs. Bennett," she began, "we've received reports that you intend to flee the state with the child. Is that true?" The world tilted again. "What? No." She looked unconvinced. "The father says you're unstable. He's requesting emergency custody." "Of course he is," I snapped. "Because he's guilty." The officer stepped closer. "Ma'am, please calm down." "Calm down," my voice cracked. "He murdered my daughter." The words hung in the air like a confession. The social worker exchanged a look with the officer. "We'll need to schedule a psychological evaluation," she said. "Until then, please refrain from contact with the father." When they left, I sank to the floor and sobbed. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was exhaustion. Every door I knocked on closed. Every truth I spoke turned into madness in their ears. I was alone, screaming into a void that refused to echo back. But then that night, Tom called again. His voice was breathless, urgent. "Helen, you're not crazy. They found something new." I gripped the phone. "What?" "Security footage from a gas station 2 blocks from their house. The night Emma died, Evan bought cleaning supplies, trash bags, and bleach at 12:03 a.m., 20 minutes after the estimated time of death. I closed my eyes, shaking. "That's it," I whispered. "That's what we needed." "It's a start," Tom said. "The DA's pushing for a warrant. Don't do anything reckless now. Promise me." But as I looked at Lily sleeping on the couch, clutching her rabbit, I knew I couldn't promise him that. The time for waiting was over. The time for fear was over. I had proof, and tomorrow I'd use it. Because I finally understood something Emma hadn't lived long enough to learn sometimes. To protect the ones you love, you have to stop being afraid of becoming the villain in someone else's story. The next morning, the world looked different. The same sky, the same tired streets, but everything inside me had shifted. I'd spent months running on fear, hiding behind grief, begging for someone else to fix what I already knew was broken. But that night, listening to Emma's voice again, something in me hardened. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I woke up early before the sun and brewed coffee I didn't drink. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and adrenaline. Lily was still asleep on the couch, her small hand clutching the stuffed rabbit like a shield. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Stay brave for Mommy, okay?" Then I called Evan. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was calm, almost polite. "Helen, I was starting to wonder when you'd come to your senses." "I don't want to fight anymore," I said, keeping my tone even. "You win. You can take Lily. I just want to say goodbye properly." There was a long pause on the line, and I could almost hear his suspicion. "Where?" "The house," I said. "Tonight, 7 o'clock. He chuckled softly. "That's very mature of you, Helen. I'll see you then." I hung up before he could say anything else. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone, but the decision was made. I wasn't going there to surrender. I was going there to end it. Tom arrived an hour later, holding a folder of documents. "The DA's office is requesting a warrant," he said. "We're close, Helen, but it could take another day or two." "We don't have that long," I said. "I'm meeting him tonight." His eyes widened. "You can't do that alone." "I'm not," I said, showing him the small black recorder in my hand. "This record's up to 4 hours. I'll hide it under my jacket. If he confesses, you'll have what you need." Tom stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "That's not a plan. It's suicide." I met his gaze. "Emma didn't get a second chance, Tom. I'm not letting him walk away with her daughter, too." He swore under his breath and ran a hand through his hair. "All right. If you're going to do this, I'm not letting you walk in there blind. I'll wait outside. You text me the moment you're inside, and if you don't text again within 30 minutes, I'm coming in." "Deal," I said. The rest of the day crawled by in silence. I packed a small bag for Lily and left it by the door just in case. Around 6, I dressed in a dark coat and slipped the recorder into the inside pocket. I tested it twice to make sure it was working. "Helen Bennett," I whispered into it. April 17th, meeting with Evan Morrison, 7 p.m. If you're hearing this, it means he didn't let me walk out. Tom arrived 15 minutes early. He parked down the street, his car hidden behind a line of bare trees. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I've never been more sure," I said. When I pulled up to Emma's house, the porch light was on for the first time since she died. The yellow glow spilled across the steps like an open mouth. Evan's truck sat in the driveway, freshly washed tires gleaming. He was waiting for me. I could hear my pulse in my ears as I climbed the steps. The door opened before I could knock. "Right on time," he said. He was smiling, but there was nothing warm in it. "Come in." The house was spotless. The faint scent of bleach still hung in the air. The same photo of Emma and Lily was on the mantel, but now the glass was cracked straight through the middle, separating them like a fault line. "Where's Lily?" he asked, his tone casual, though his eyes flicked to my hands as if expecting me to be holding her. "She's safe," I said, "with a friend." He raised an eyebrow. "You didn't bring her." "That's disappointing. She didn't want to come." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "You really have poisoned her against me." I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside were printed stills from the gas station footage Tom had given me. Evan glanced at them, his expression unchanged. "What's this supposed to be?" "Proof," I said evenly. "You were at the gas station the night Emma died, buying cleaning supplies 20 minutes after she fell down the stairs." He tossed the photos back on the table, unbothered. "I clean my house, Helen. That's hardly a crime." "You killed her," I said. The words came out calm, steady. "You did it for the money." He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. "You know, for someone who calls herself a mother, you've made a career out of accusing the wrong people. Maybe that's why Emma stopped calling you. My jaw tightened. She called me that night. His smile faded. I have her voice on video, I continued. She said, if you're watching this, it means he did it. That's you, Evan. She was talking about you. For the first time, his composure cracked. His eyes flicked to the hallway where the bedroom was, as if he could still see the ghost of that moment. You shouldn't have gone back, he said quietly. Why? Because I found the camera? Or because I finally stopped believing your lies? He pushed away from the counter, his voice rising. You're making a mistake. You're not just ruining my life, you're ruining Lily's. She'll thank me one day, I said. His eyes darkened. You think they'll believe an old woman with a martyr complex. The cops, the courts, they already think you're unhinged. I made sure of it. I know, I said, and it's all on record. His brow furrowed. What? The silence stretched. He took a slow step toward me. What did you just say? I didn't move. You heard me. He stared at me for a long time, realization dawning, then laughed softly. You think you're clever. I reached for my phone, pretending to check a message from Tom. Evan's eyes followed the motion, and I saw the flicker of panic, the first real crack in his armor. It's over, I said quietly. You can lie to the police, but not to the recording I have. His smile returned colder this time. You don't have the guts to use it. Try me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. You should have stayed out of it, Helen. You're old. People expect you to fade quietly. You could have lived the rest of your sad little life in peace. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I said. He stared at me, eyes narrowing, then smiled again, but this time it was forced. We'll see. The sound of a car door closing outside broke the tension. Evan turned toward the window. Expecting company, he asked. I didn't answer. Tom's text came through then, one word, now. Evan's eyes darted to my phone, then back to me. You think you can trap me, he hissed. You don't know who you're dealing with. He moved toward me, and for a second I thought he might lunge, but headlights flashed through the window, flooding the room with white light. He froze. Outside, I heard a car door slam, heavy footsteps, Tom's voice. Evan Morrison step away from her. Evan backed up, his breathing, sharp eyes wild. You called the cops. Not yet, I said, but I don't need to. You just confessed. His face twisted with fury. You won't win, Helen. I already did, I said softly. He stormed past me and out the front door, slamming it so hard the glass rattled. I stood there, shaking the recorder, still humming faintly inside my coat pocket. My knees nearly gave out, but I forced myself to stay upright. Tom came in seconds later, his face pale. Are you okay? I nodded, though the truth was I'd never be the same again. He knows now, I said, and he's going to run. Good, Tom said. Let him. We'll be right behind him. I reached into my coat and turned off the recorder. The red light blinked once and went dark. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I'm not afraid of him anymore, I said. And I meant it. The storm started just after midnight. Rain hammered against the windows in wild sheets, wind clawing at the shutters like something alive. I sat in the living room with the lights off, the only illumination coming from the occasional flash of lightning. Lily was asleep upstairs, her small breath steady through the baby monitor on the table beside me. The recorder was still in my coat pocket, its tiny red light blinking like a heartbeat. Tom had taken the audio to the DA an hour earlier. Stay put, he'd said before driving off. Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone. I had promised, but as the night wore on, that promise began to feel fragile. The house was too quiet, and I could feel it, the shift in the air, that subtle electricity that comes before something terrible. Around 1 a.m, the phone rang. I jumped, knocking over my mug of cold coffee. My hand shook as I answered. Did you think this was over? Evan's voice? Calm, slow, almost tender. My stomach turned. You should stop calling Evan. The police have your confession. He chuckled softly, and the sound crawled through the line. A confession, you mean? That little toy recorder you think makes you smart. You really believe anyone will take an old woman's word over mine? It's not my word anymore, I said. It's evidence. The silence that followed was worse than the words. I could hear his breath on the line, steady and close. Then he said, You always were dramatic, Helen. But if you think you can take Lily from me, you're the one who needs help. I'm not taking her from you, I whispered. I'm saving her from you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the dial tone humming like static in my skull. My first thought was to call Tom. My second was that if I did, it might already be too late. Because somewhere deep in the storm outside, I heard it. The low rumble of a truck engine. I ran to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to see. Headlights moved slowly up the drive, cutting through the rain like knives. Evan's truck. My body went cold. I moved fast, checking the locks again, even though I knew they were secure. I turned off the baby monitor, afraid he might somehow use it to hear me. I grabbed my phone, dialed Tom's number, and whispered, "He's here." But the call didn't go through. No signal. The storm had knocked it out. A loud bang came from the back door, then another. The third hit cracked the frame. "Evan," I shouted, "the police are coming. Leave now while you can." His voice came through the door, calm and almost amused. "I just want to talk, Helen. You owe me that much." I backed away, slowly, heart pounding. He hit the door again, harder this time, and the sound of wood splintering filled the air. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, Tom's old revolver, the one he'd insisted I keep in a drawer just in case. My hands trembled as I loaded the single bullet he'd given me. "Only use it if there's no other choice," he'd said. The next blow sent the door flying open. Evan stepped inside, rain dripping from his hair, his face half lit by the flash of lightning. He looked different now, wild, unhinged eyes burning with something close to joy. "You shouldn't have done that, Helen," he said, wiping rain from his brow. "You shouldn't have gone to the police." "Get out," I said, aiming the gun with both hands. He laughed, spreading his arms like he was humoring a child. "You're not going to shoot me. You're a grandmother, not a killer." "I'm a mother," I said. "That's worse for you." He took a step forward. I stepped back. The floor creaked under us, the sound of the storm outside blending with the steady drum of my heartbeat. "You think you know everything," he said. "You don't know what she did to me." "What you did, I corrected." He shook his head, smiling faintly. "Emma wanted to ruin me. She was going to take Lily, tell everyone I was abusive. I couldn't let that happen." My finger tightened on the trigger. "So you killed her." He tilted his head, the smile widening. I stopped her. Lightning flashed, and for a moment his face looked almost serene, like he believed what he'd done was mercy. "She was going to leave," he said. "I told her we could fix things. She wouldn't listen. She called you. She said you'd help her. You always had to be the hero, didn't you? Helen, always the savior." The anger in his voice rose with every word, the calm slipping away. "She wouldn't shut up, so I made her shut up. Just like you're going to shut up now." He lunged forward, the gun went off. The sound was deafening, a crack that split the air and echoed through the house. Evan stumbled, not from the bullet it had missed, but from surprise. He looked at me, fury replacing shock. "You missed," he said. "I wasn't aiming for you," I replied. "I wanted the neighbors to hear." He sneered, lunging again. I swung the gun, striking him across the face. He stumbled back, blood running from his temple. I ran toward the stairs, shouting, "Lily, run! Go hide, baby, hide!" Her scream answered me from upstairs. I turned, but Evan grabbed my arm, slamming me against the wall. Pain shot through my shoulder. The gun fell to the floor. "You shouldn't have involved her," he shouted, spittle hitting my face. "She's my daughter." "She's Emma's daughter," I spat back, "and she'll never be yours." He hit me then hard enough to send me sprawling. My head hit the corner of the table, the world spinning. Through the haze, I saw him grab the gun. He looked at it for a long second, his chest heaving. "You think you can take everything from me," he said. "First my wife, now my kid, my life." Before he could finish, a small voice echoed from the stairs. "Daddy, stop." Evan froze. Lily stood there in her nightgown, clutching her rabbit. Her face was pale but defiant. "Go back upstairs, sweetheart," I croaked, trying to sit up. "Please." Evan turned toward her slowly, his expression softening for the briefest moment. "It's okay, princess. Daddy's just talking to Grandma." "Mommy's watching," she said quietly. "She saw what you did." Something in his face changed. The mask cracked completely. "What did you say?" "She saw you push her," Lily said. "She told me." Evan's eyes went wide. For the first time, he looked afraid. "You're lying." "She told me in my dream," Lily whispered. "She said Grandma would stop you." Lightning flashed again, illuminating all three of us, him with the gun, me bleeding on the floor, and Lily standing tall at the top of the stairs. For a moment, the entire world felt suspended, caught between past and future, truth and silence. Then a new sound cut through the storm, the wail of sirens, faint but growing louder. Evan turned his head toward the window, his grip on the gun tightening. "Tom," I whispered. He looked back at me, realization dawning. He'd heard the shot. Evan's expression twisted. "You set me up." "You set yourself up," I said, blood filling my mouth. "You just confessed again." He raised the gun, aiming at me. "I should have finished this the night she called you." But before he could fire, the front door burst open. A blinding beam of a flashlight sliced through the dark. "Police, drop it." Evan hesitated, the gun still aimed at me. For a moment, I thought he might shoot anyway. Then he lowered it slowly, his shoulders slumping. The officers rushed in, shouting commands, pushing him to the floor. One of them pulled me up, supporting my weight as I swayed. Tom appeared in the doorway, his face pale with rain and fury. "Jesus, Helen," he said, his voice shaking. "You could have been killed." I looked past him at Evan, handcuffed, blood dripping from his nose, his eyes full of pure hatred. "He tried," I said softly. Lily ran down the stairs and threw her arms around me. I held her so tightly I could feel her heartbeat against mine. "It's over," I whispered into her hair. "Mommy can rest now." Outside, the storm began to ease. The rain slowed to a steady drizzle, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. But deep down, I knew it wasn't truly over. Not yet, because there was still something missing, the final piece that would make the world believe. The proof of what happened that night. And I had a feeling Emma hadn't left this world without leaving it behind. 3 days after the storm, I walked into the courthouse for the hearing. My arm was still in a sling from the fall, and the bruises on my face had started to yellow, but I refused to cover them. They weren't shame anymore. They were proof. Lily stayed with Carol, my neighbor, while Tom met me at the front steps folder, in hand, his jaw tight. "You don't have to do this today," he said quietly. "The DA has enough without your testimony." "I have to," I said, "for Emma." Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and cold air. The benches were full. Neighbors, reporters, strangers who'd read the headlines, "Mother's death reopened after grandmother's near-fatal confrontation." Evan sat at the defense table in a crisp suit, his face expressionless, but I saw the tension in his hands, the way his knuckles turned white as he gripped the table. His lawyer whispered something, and he nodded once without looking up. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice, called the room to order. The DA began by presenting the physical evidence, Emma's note, the insurance papers, the gas station footage, and finally the recording from my jacket. The audio filled the courtroom like a haunting. My voice trembled at first, but it was Evan's voice everyone leaned in to hear. She wouldn't shut up, so I made her shut up, just like you're going to shut up now. The silence afterward was complete. Even the judge looked shaken. Evan's lawyer rose quickly, trying to minimize the damage. "Your Honor, that recording was obtained without my client's consent. It shouldn't be admissible." The DA was ready. The recording was captured during an ongoing investigation and handed directly to law enforcement. It's admissible under the state's one-party consent law. The judge nodded, overruled. Evan's lawyer sat down heavily. I could feel the anger radiating off him like heat. When it was my turn to testify, I took the stand and swore the oath. My voice wavered on the first question, but steadied as I spoke. I told them about the phone call from Lily the night I found the note, the camera in the stuffed rabbit, the threats, the letter in my mailbox. Every detail that had lived in my nightmares now lived on the record. At one point, Evan leaned forward and whispered something to his lawyer. The lawyer shook his head, but Evan smiled faintly, just enough for me to see it, that same smug curve of his mouth that I'd seen the night Emma died. When the DA asked me to describe the night of the confrontation, I hesitated. "He came into my house," I said slowly. "He told me I'd made a mistake. He said Emma wouldn't stop talking, so he made her stop." The DA nodded. "And did you understand what he meant by that?" "I did," I said, looking directly at Evan. "He killed her." His lawyer jumped up. "Objection, speculation." "Overruled," the judge said. For a moment, the courtroom went utterly still. Evan stared back at me, his eyes hard, his jaw clenched, and for the first time I saw it fear. After my testimony, Tom took the stand. He laid out the timeline with the precision of a cop who'd done this 100 times. The life insurance policy, the debts, the purchase of bleach and cleaning supplies. The prior assault report, the threats against me. Piece by piece, he painted the picture of a man who had planned everything down to the smallest detail and who had finally made one mistake too many. The defense tried to tear it down. They argued Emma was unstable, that she had depression, that she'd written the note as a request for help, not a warning. They even brought up my age, suggesting grief had clouded my judgment. I let them talk. Every word they said made them sound smaller. Then the DA did something no one expected. She called the lead investigator back to the stand, Detective Harper. She said, "Did your team find any additional evidence during the secondary search of the property?" The detective nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We recovered a damaged cell phone inside a heating vent in the master bedroom. It was registered to the victim, Emma Morrison." Evan's head snapped up. "Where was this phone during the initial investigation?" the DA asked. "It appears to have been deliberately hidden," Harper said. "Wrapped in cloth, placed deep inside the vent. It was overlooked during the first search." The DA approached the bench. "Your Honor, the phone has been repaired and authenticated. We request permission to play a recovered video file found on it." Evan's lawyer immediately objected, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Proceed." The lights dimmed. The projector flickered to life. On the screen at the front of the courtroom, the image appeared grainy but unmistakable. Emma's face, pale and tear-streaked, illuminated by the glow of a bedside lamp. Her voice filled the room. "He says I can't leave," she whispered. "He says if I do, he'll make it look like I killed myself. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm scared. If anyone finds this, please don't let him have Lily." In the background, there was movement, a shadow crossing the wall, then Evan's voice, sharp and slurred. "What are you doing with your phone?" Emma flinched. "Nothing. He moved into frame, then half his face visible. "Don't lie to me." "Evan, please." The camera jerked violently. There was a crash, a thud, and then the image went sideways. The phone hit the floor, showing only the ceiling, but the sound continued. Emma screaming, Evan shouting, the heavy thump of something hitting the stairs. Then silence. The video ended. No one in the room moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the projector fan. The judge's voice broke the stillness. "Detective Harper is the man heard in this video, confirmed to be the defendant, Evan Morrison." "Yes, Your Honor. The voice analysis is a match." Evan's lawyer stood stammering. We request a recess." But it was too late. The damage was done. Evan's calm shattered. He surged to his feet, shouting over the judge. "She was going to ruin everything you don't understand." Two deputies rushed forward, restraining him as he struggled. "She wanted to take my kid. She wouldn't listen." "Mr. Morrison," the judge shouted. "Sit down." He didn't. He turned toward me instead, eyes wild. "You think you won. You think this makes you right." Tom was on his feet now, moving toward me, but I didn't flinch. I met Evan's eyes and said no. It makes her free. He stopped struggling then, just for a moment. The rage drained from his face, replaced by something else, recognition maybe, or realization. He sagged against the deputies, the fight gone. The judge's gavel came down. The court orders the defendant remanded without bail pending formal charges of second-degree murder. The courtroom erupted, reporters shouting questions, people murmuring the sound of chairs scraping the floor. But I didn't hear any of it. My ears were ringing. My eyes were on the screen, frozen on the last frame of Emma's face before the camera fell. Tom touched my shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. I nodded, but I couldn't stop the tears that came. "She tried to warn us," I whispered. "She tried so hard." Evan was led out in handcuffs. His head bowed, the press lights flashing around him. For the first time, he didn't look like the man who had haunted my nights. He looked small, broken, ordinary. As the courtroom emptied, I stayed seated, staring at the empty witness stand. The judge had left the reporters, had followed the noise outside, but I couldn't move. I felt lighter and heavier at once, like grief and relief were fighting for the same space inside me. Tom finally said, "Come on, Helen, let's take you home." Outside, the afternoon light was pale but warm. People were gathered on the courthouse steps, whispering, watching. A few of them nodded as I passed. Others avoided my eyes. It didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for them. At the bottom of the steps, Carol was waiting with Lily. The moment she saw me, Lily ran forward, throwing her arms around my waist. "Is it over, Grandma?" she asked. I knelt down, brushing her hair back. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over." She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen in months. "Mommy said thank you." I pulled her close, holding her until I could breathe again. Across the street, the press cameras kept flashing. The story would spread by morning. But for now, there was only the fading sound of thunder far away and the steady beat of my granddaughter's heart against mine. And for the first time since that terrible night, I let myself believe Emma could finally rest. The story hit the news before dawn. By morning, it was everywhere on every station, every headline, every phone screen in town. Grandmother exposes murderer, son-in-law after hidden video found. Reporters parked their vans along Riverside Drive like vultures waiting for movement. I watched them through the blinds as the sun came up the pale light cutting through the kitchen window. My coffee sat untouched. My hand still trembled when I thought about the video, the sound of Emma's scream frozen forever in those few seconds of horror. But the world didn't freeze with it. It moved fast and loud. The first knock came at 8 a.m. A young woman from the local paper stood on the porch, her voice trembling with excitement. "Mrs. Bennett, could you tell us how it feels to finally get justice?" I almost laughed. Justice. That word had a bitter edge now. "It doesn't feel like justice," I said quietly. "It feels like breathing after almost drowning." She wrote that down. I hadn't meant for it to sound poetic, but it spread anyway. By noon, the quote was online under my photo, my tired face framed by the gray morning light. Tom called an hour later. "They're holding Evan without bail," he said. "He'll be transferred to county jail today. The DA's pushing for first degree now that the video's authenticated." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear. "Good." He hesitated. "You did it, Helen. You really did." I wanted to believe that, but as I looked toward the stairs where Lily was sitting cross-legged drawing on the landing, I knew doing it came with a price. When the mail arrived that afternoon, there were letters, dozens of them. Handwritten, typed some with shaky cursive from people I'd never met. My sister went through the same thing. I lost my daughter too, but I wasn't brave enough to fight. "You're a hero." Hero. Another word that didn't fit. I wasn't brave. I was angry. I was desperate. I was a mother who had nothing left to lose. Still, the messages poured in. Flowers showed up on the porch casseroles. I didn't have room for cards with Bible verses and phone numbers. The community that had once whispered about me now couldn't stop talking. The same neighbors who'd crossed the street to avoid me were now knocking on my door with tearful apologies. One of them was Mrs. Gray from 2 houses down. She stood on the porch, wringing her hands. "Helen, I'm so sorry," she said. "I believed him. I thought you'd lost your mind. I didn't know." I looked at her for a long time before answering. "None of us wanted to know," I said. "That's how men like him get away with it." She nodded, eyes wet, and pressed a plate of cookies into my hands before hurrying back home. By evening, a small crowd had gathered at the end of the street, people with candles holding signs that said "Justice for Emma" and "Protect the Children." Someone must have organized it online. I hadn't asked for a vigil, but when I saw the flickering lights against the dark, I couldn't stop the tears. Carol came over to watch Lily so I could step outside. The cool air smelled like rain and wax. As I walked toward the crowd, people began to clap. The sound washed over me soft at first, then rising wave after wave. A woman stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Bennett, my sister died last year. Her husband said it was an accident. They never looked into it. But after what you did, I think I'm going to ask them to reopen her case." I didn't know what to say. I just took her hand. "Then don't stop until they listen," I said. A man near the back shouted, "You saved that little girl. You saved her life." I shook my head. "No," I said, "Emma saved her. I just finally listened." Someone started to sing an old hymn, soft and broken, and the sound of it carried down the street like a memory. For a few minutes, the whole world felt still again. Later that night, after everyone left, I found Lily sitting by the window watching the last of the candles burn out. "Why were all those people here, Grandma?" she asked. "They came to say your mommy was brave," I said. "Was she? She was the bravest person I ever knew." She nodded slowly, then turned to look at me. "Does that mean you're brave too?" I smiled, brushing her hair back. "No, sweetheart, it means I learned from her." The days that followed blurred together. News trucks came and went. Talk shows called. A producer from a national network wanted to turn our story into a documentary. I said no to all of it. I didn't want Emma's pain turned into a segment between commercials. But one thing I did agree to: a new program Tom helped start with the local police. They called it Emma's Law, a proposal for mandatory secondary investigations in domestic deaths labeled as suicides. "We're naming it after her," Tom said when he told me. "Because she started it, Helen. You just carried it home." The first public meeting was held in the town hall. I stood at the podium looking out over the crowd. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. "My daughter's case was almost forgotten," I said. "It was filed away because it looked clean, because the right people said the right words. But every bruise tells a story. Every silence hides a scream. And sometimes it takes someone old, someone no one listens to anymore, to make the world stop and look again." When I finished, people stood and clapped. I didn't know how to handle it. I just kept thinking about Emma's handwriting, those 7 words that started everything. "If anything happens to me, take care of Lily." That night after the meeting, I drove home alone. The road was quiet, lined with the dim glow of streetlights and the faint buzz of crickets. For the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. Evan was gone. The system that had failed Emma finally working in her name. But grief doesn't end when justice begins. It lingers in the corners of the house, in the smell of her perfume, the sound of Lily's laugh, the way the sun hits the picture on the mantel. I'd won, but winning didn't bring her back. A week later, I visited her grave for the first time since the trial. I brought fresh daisies, her favorite, and the drawing Lily had made of the 3 of us, her, me, and Emma, standing in front of a house with the words, "Safe Now," written above it in crayon. I placed it beside the headstone and whispered, "You did it, baby. You're free." When I got back to the car, my phone buzzed a text from Tom. "The governor's office wants to meet about Emma's Law. You started something big, Helen." I looked up at the sky, gray and heavy with clouds, and smiled through the tears. "No," I whispered. She did. At home that evening, Carol came by with dinner. Lily was already setting the table, humming to herself. "What are we having?" she asked. "Spaghetti," Carol said, laughing. "Your grandma's favorite." Lily grinned. "Then it's Mommy's favorite, too." I froze for a second, then nodded. "Yes, it is." We ate together quietly at first, then talking, laughing. For once, the house felt full again, not haunted, not hollow, just alive. Later, after Lily went to bed, I stepped out to the porch. The night was cool, the air soft with the scent of rain. Across the street, the candle wax from the vigil still stained the pavement, little white circles glowing under the streetlight. I closed my eyes and listened. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes sang in the dark light and steady. People said the story inspired them. Maybe it did. But the truth was simpler. I wasn't brave. I was broken. And when the world tried to bury the truth with my daughter, I refused to let it. That's what fire does when it spreads. It doesn't ask permission. It burns until everything false is gone. And as I stood there under the quiet night, I realized that maybe that's what Emma had wanted all along. Not revenge, not even justice, just light. Enough for Lily to see the way forward. The sentencing took place 6 weeks later on a warm morning that felt too gentle for what it was about to hold. The courthouse steps were lined with cameras, again the same faces, the same restless hum of attention. But this time it wasn't fear that carried me up those stairs. It was closure. Evan stood before the judge in a gray prison uniform, his wrists shackled. The arrogance that had once lived in his face was gone now. His eyes were sunken, his jaw slack, his voice barely a whisper when the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing. He looked at the floor. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he muttered. "It just got out of control." The courtroom was silent. Even his lawyer didn't look at him. The judge's expression didn't change. "You made choices, Mr. Morrison," she said. "Choices that destroyed a family, took a mother from her child, and nearly cost another woman her life. The court finds you guilty of second-degree murder and sentences you to 40 years without parole." The gavel came down like a door closing forever. Evan didn't react. He didn't shout, didn't fight. He just stared straight ahead as deputies led him away, the chains at his wrists clinking faintly in the air. I didn't look away. Not out of anger, not even out of satisfaction, just to make sure it was real this time. that he was finally gone. Outside, the air smelled like sunlight on pavement. Reporters swarmed again, microphones thrust forward, questions sharp and eager. "Mrs. Bennett, how do you feel? Do you forgive him? What comes next?" I paused at the top of the courthouse steps and said the only thing that felt true. Nothing brings my daughter back, but now my granddaughter can grow up without fear. That's enough. The next day, the papers called it a victory for justice. I called it survival. Life after something like this doesn't return to normal. It builds a new one, brick by fragile brick. Lily started school again in the fall. On her first day, she wore a bright yellow dress and asked if Mommy could see her. "Always," I said. She smiled and waved at the sky before running into the classroom. The house felt different with her laughter in it. The quiet that once felt like grief now felt like peace. I still caught myself turning toward the door, sometimes expecting Emma to walk in with that smile that never quite hid her exhaustion. But when the ache came, I let it. Grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to live beside. Tom stopped by often, usually with groceries or paperwork for Emma's law. The bill had moved through state committee faster than anyone expected. He told me survivors groups were pushing for it nationwide. "You changed things, Helen," he said, one evening over coffee. I shook my head. "No, Emma did. I just finally listened." He smiled. "Maybe that's what change really is, someone finally listening." A month later, we received a letter from the district attorney's office. It contained a copy of the court's final judgment and a personal note from the prosecutor. "Your courage forced us all to look closer," it read. "On behalf of every case we didn't reopen soon enough, thank you." I put that letter in a small box along with Emma's note, Lily's drawing, and the stuffed rabbit that had started it all. I called it the box of truth. Some nights I'd take it out not to reopen the pain, but to remember that the truth has weight. And once you hold it, you can't pretend it's not there. Evan appealed, of course. Men like him always do. But the court denied it within weeks. The video, the insurance records, the confession, there was no room left for lies. Last I heard, he'd been moved to a state prison up north. I never asked where. Winter came early that year. On Christmas Eve, Lily and I decorated the tree together. She insisted on putting one of Emma's old ornaments, a glass angel, at the very top. When it slipped from her hand and cracked slightly against the branch, she looked up at me, worried. "It's still beautiful," I told her. "Cracks don't change that." She thought about it for a moment, then said, "Like us." I smiled, exactly like us. That night after she went to bed, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the snow fall. The world outside was still blanketed in quiet white. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next call, the next knock, the next disaster. I thought about Emma's voice, how even in her last moments she'd been thinking about her daughter, about me, about the future she wouldn't live to see. I whispered into the stillness, "She's safe now, sweetheart. You can rest." The wind moved softly through the trees outside, and for a heartbeat, I swore I could smell her perfume, jasmine and rain. The following spring, a memorial garden was built behind the courthouse in Emma's name. Small plaques lined the walkway, each one bearing the name of a victim of domestic violence. At the entrance stood a stone engraved with the words, "Truth is louder than fear." Lily and I visited on the first warm day of April. She brought a bouquet of daisies and placed them under her mother's plaque. "She liked these," she said. "She did," I replied. Lily took my hand. "Do you think she's proud of us?" "I know she is," I said. We stood there in silence for a while, the breeze stirring the petals, the sound of children laughing in the nearby park. Life went on, as it always does, but this time it went on in the light. That night back home, I opened my journal and wrote the final entry in the story that had consumed my life. I used to think justice meant punishment, but it doesn't. It means truth brought into the open where lies can't breathe. It means a little girl who can finally sleep through the night. It means peace even when your heart still breaks. I closed the journal and placed it on the shelf beside Emma's photo. She was smiling in that picture. The kind of smile that looked like the start of something, not the end. And maybe in a way it was. Spring melted into early summer, and with it came a kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. The world outside was blooming again, and for once I let myself notice it. the hum of bees near the lilac bush, the sound of Lily's laughter drifting through the open window as she chased a butterfly across the yard. It was a sound that used to make me ache. Now it made me breathe. We decided to plant a tree for Emma that morning. Not a grand ceremony, no speeches or cameras, just us. Lily chose the spot by the fence where the sun hit longest in the afternoon. She'd like it here, she said, clutching a small sapling in her hands. I knelt beside her, my knees creaking, and helped her dig. The earth was soft, dark, alive. What kind of tree is it again? I asked. Cherry blossom, she said proudly. Tom said it means new beginnings. Then it's perfect. We worked in silence for a while, the smell of soil mixing with the scent of grass and spring rain. When the hole was deep enough, Lily placed the sapling carefully in the center, her small fingers brushing the roots as if she were tucking them into bed. There she whispered, "Now Mommy can grow again." I felt the tears before I even realized I was crying. "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "Now she can." When we finished, we stood side by side looking at the tiny tree swaying in the breeze. Its branches were thin, fragile, but reaching upward like hope, learning to stand again after too long in the dark. After lunch, Lily ran inside to grab her drawing pad. "I'm going to draw it every year," she said, "so we can see how much it grows." I smiled. "Then one day we'll have a whole forest." That night, after she fell asleep, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The stars reflected faintly in the window beside me. The cherry blossom looked small against the night sky, but I knew by next spring it would bloom. Everything does eventually. I thought about the path that had led us here, the phone call that shattered the silence, the nights of fear, the faces that turned away, the moment I chose to stop being afraid. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival turned into purpose. Tom came by the next day with a box of official documents. "You'll want to keep these," he said. Inside were the final papers from the case, Evan's conviction, the deed transfer for the house, and a formal notice of adoption. I traced my finger over the last one. Helen Bennett, legal guardian and adoptive mother of Lily Morrison. "She's yours now officially," Tom said. "Not that she wasn't already." I smiled. "Thank you." He hesitated. "You ever think about leaving this place, starting fresh somewhere else?" I looked out at the yard, at the sapling dancing in the wind. "No," I said. "This is where the truth lives, and where Emma rests." He nodded. "Then maybe that's enough." Before he left, he turned back at the gate. "You know," he said, "people talk about courage like it's something you find, but I think you build it piece by piece like you did. You kept standing even when everyone else sat down." I didn't answer right away. "Courage isn't loud," I said, finally. "Sometimes it's just a mother refusing to stay quiet." After he left, I walked upstairs to check on Lily. She was asleep, one hand under her cheek, the other clutching the same stuffed rabbit that had once held a secret. The stitches had been repaired, but the small scar along its back remained a reminder that even the things meant to comfort us can hold the truth if we look closely enough. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're safe, baby. You're free." The next morning, the town held a small ceremony at the courthouse for the official passage of Emma's law. I didn't plan to speak, but when they called my name, I stepped forward anyway. The crowd was small officers, survivors, parents holding photos of loved ones, but their faces were full of something I recognized: determination. I stood at the microphone and looked at them, my voice steady. When my daughter died, people told me to move on. They told me not to question. They told me to trust the system. But the system only works when we refuse to let it sleep, when we listen to the bruises, to the silences, to the people who can't speak anymore. I paused, feeling the weight of their eyes on me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that love doesn't end when life does. It becomes something else. It becomes the reason you keep fighting. When I stepped back, the applause was quiet but real. Someone handed me a small medal from the governor's office, a recognition for courage and service. I tucked it into my pocket. Medals don't mean much compared to the sound of your granddaughter laughing again. That evening, Lily and I sat by the window watching the sunset, paint the sky pink and gold, the same colors as the cherry blossoms outside. She leaned against me and said, "Grandma, do you think Mommy can see the tree?" "I think she planted it through us," I said. "We just helped it grow." Lily nodded, satisfied. "Then it's our turn to take care of it." I smiled, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart, always." As darkness fell, I looked out at the sapling again, its branches reaching toward the fading light. And for the first time, I let myself imagine the future, not the pain of what we'd lost, but the quiet strength of what remained. Emma's voice still lived in my memory, but now it wasn't a whisper of warning. It was something else, a reminder. If anything happens to me, take care of Lily. I had done that. I had kept my promise. And in keeping it, I'd learned something Emma had always known but never said out loud. The truest kind of love is the one that refuses to disappear, even when everything else does. So that's my story. Not a tale of revenge, but of truth finding its way through the cracks of silence. If you're watching this, if you've ever looked the other way when something felt wrong, don't. Listen, ask, act. Because sometimes the difference between life and death isn't power or luck. It's the one person brave enough to believe the quiet voices. Do you think Emma's story will help others find their own truth? Comment 1. If you believe her courage still lives on, and like this video, if you think love, real fierce, unbreakable love, can outlive fear itself.